During her daring 1937 attempt to round the globe, pioneering aviator Amelia Earhart vanished. Both she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, went missing over the Pacific with just 7,000 miles remaining on their voyage. One of aviation's biggest mysteries, her fate has eluded various theories and inquiries. What transpired during her last flight, if anything? Stay tuned for the very last moment to find out what this ongoing enigma has revealed. Amelia Earhart came into this world in Atchison, Kansas on July 24, 1897. Edwin and Amy Earhart, her parents, were overjoyed. However, their happiness was overshadowed by their sorrowful background. Just 1 year prior to Amelia, her older sister experienced a stillbirth. Regardless, the Earharts kept their faith, and their daughter Amelia quickly showed that she was full of life and adventure. Amelia had an extraordinary upbringing, spending most of her time at her grandfather Alfred Otis' home. The esteemed judge and bank president, Otis was a man of strong moral principles. His daughter's marriage to Edwin, an unsuccessful lawyer, was something he strongly disapproved of. Despite this, Amelia's daring spirit remained unabated. Melee was the nickname given to Amelia, and Pidge was the nickname given to her younger sister Grace. Their adventures, spearheaded by Amelia, included anything from rat hunting with a rifle to tree climbing. Much to their grandmother's dismay, their mother Amy encouraged their carefree play. Amelia and Grace opted for bloomers, which allowed them more freedom instead of dresses like the other girls. It was clear from Amelia's early rejection of convention what she would become. A constructed ramp influenced by a roller coaster Amelia had seen as a child was one of her most memorable childhood adventures. It was constructed atop their tool shed by her and her uncle. Even though her maiden flight was a disaster, the thrill she had throughout it lingered. The Earhart family relocated to Des Moines, Iowa in 1907. It was during a state fair that Amelia witnessed her initial encounter with an airplane. She was unimpressed by the dilapidated biplane, which was surprising. Despite her lack of enthusiasm for the plane, she clearly enjoyed the merry-go-round. However, seeds are planted by life and eventually sprout. The determination of Amelia was unwavering, even if her father's battles with alcoholism caused financial turmoil. The family sought stability by constantly relocating. They had to uproot their lives and go to Chicago due to Edwin's alcoholism. Amelia attended Hyde Park High School, where she experienced feelings of isolation but was resolute in her pursuit of a quality education. When Amelia graduated in 1916, she had big plans. As she aspired to break into male-dominated industries, she preserved a scrapbook of other women doing so. She started out at Ogon's Pennsylvania school but dropped out to volunteer as a WWI nurse's aide in Toronto. Her fascination in aviation was ignited by her interactions with returning soldiers and pilots. Amelia became quite sick during the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. She suffered through a difficult and drawn-out recuperation, accompanied by chronic sinus problems. However, she laid the framework for her future profession throughout her convalescence by reading widely and dabbling with mechanics. A turning point in Amelia's life occurred in the early 1920s. An adrenaline-pumping pilot's daring drop at a Toronto air show was her favorite part. A bond with the plane washed over her. A mysterious allure toward the heavens. Taking a passenger trip in California in 1920 solidified this feeling. The event had a profound effect on me. As soon as I climbed 200 or 300 feet into the air, she continued, I realized I had to take flight. Amelia started flying with pioneering female pilot Netta Snook. To pay for her classes, she took odd jobs, and her mother only reluctantly helped out. Her first plane was purchased by her in 1921, the Canary, a Kinner Airsteer of brilliant yellow. Even though people teased her about her new leather flying coat, her maiden solo flight was a time of accomplishment. For the sake of fitting in, she slept with the coat on to make it look old. By soaring to 14,000 feet on October 22, 1922, Amelia established a new record for the world. Her achievement made her the 16th American woman to get a pilot's license in 1923. From being an inquisitive young girl in Kansas to becoming a trailblazing aviator, her story was only starting. propelled by an unwavering determination and a deep affection for the vast blue expanse above. A major obstacle stood in the way of Amelia Earhart's ascent into aviation in the early 1920s. Her mother's management of her inheritance crumbled to dust after an unsuccessful investment in a gypsum mine. A second Kinner plane and Amelia's cherished canary had to go. Afterwards, she acquired a two-seater Kissel Goldbug, which she dubbed the Yellow Peril. During this time, she hit rock bottom, worsened by chronic sinus problems that necessitated yet another botched operation in 1924. Amelia tried her hand at a photography company and other endeavors while she put her aspirations of becoming an aviator on hold. After Amelia's parents split up in 1924, she and her mother set out on a cross-country journey in the Yellow Peril. Along the way to Boston, Massachusetts, they took a side trip to Banff, Alberta, in the western United States. Amelia finally felt better after her second sinus procedure in Boston. Upon her recovery, she made a brief return to Columbia University, but financial difficulties forced her to drop out. Amelia had to get a job because her mother could not pay for her tuition anymore. Denison Home was a Boston settlement home where Amelia worked her way up from teaching to social work. Her love for flying was unwavering, even when she was having financial difficulties. Not long after becoming a member of the Boston branch of the American Aeronautical Society, she was named vice president. With a little investment, she helped fund its operations and took off from Denison Airport in Quincy, Massachusetts. She was the first aircraft to formally depart Denison Airport in 1927. In addition to penning pieces extolling the virtues of flying, Amelia was a sales representative for Kinner Aircraft in the Boston region. She started organizing a group for women pilots as her fame rose in her hometown. After Charles Lindbergh flew solo across the Atlantic in 1927, Amelia got her big break. Aspiring pilot Amy Guest's goal was to cross the Atlantic Ocean first. Because Guest thought the journey was too risky for her, she chose to sponsor another woman who had a good reputation instead. Captain Hilton H. Rayleigh called Amelia in April 1928 while she was on the clock. "Are you interested in taking an Atlantic flight?" Everything I had hoped for was in the deal. Amelia was selected to fly across the Atlantic with pilot Wilmer Stoltz and co-pilot Lewis Gordon following a round of interviews with project organizers, one of whom was publisher George P. Putnam. She had the additional responsibility of maintaining the flight log as a passenger, but the opportunity was enormous nonetheless. In a Fokker F-7 billion 3M called Friendship, the crew took off from Trepassey Harbor, Newfoundland on June 17, 1928. After a 20-hour and 40-minute trip, they touched down in Poole, close to Buryport, in South Wales. Though her part was small, Amelia's encounter strengthened her resolve. She said that Stultz did all the flying when questioned about the flight. "Ought to. I was simply a bag of potatoes, you know," she continued. "Perhaps I will give it a go on my own sometime." Everyone was so impressed by Amelia's accomplishment. Southampton, England on June 19, 1928 was the site of her boisterous reception. Lady Mary Heath was an Irish aviator who she briefly piloted before buying and returning to the U.S. in Avro Avion 594 Avion 3. The flight crew was welcomed back to the United States with a ticker tape parade in Manhattan and a White House reception with President Calvin Coolidge upon their return on July 6. Because of her striking likeness to Charles Lindbergh, Amelia was dubbed Lady Lindy by the press, and she was immediately proclaimed Queen of the Air. After returning to the United States, she embarked on a grueling lecture tour that George Putnam had vigorously pushed. She published a book, started lecturing again, and was in ads for Lucky Strike cigarettes and luggage. Using her wealth to help aviation causes, Amelia endured controversies such as the blowback from endorsing cigarettes. Included a contribution to the South Pole expedition led by Commander Richard Byrd. Amelia became a well-known persona because to a marketing campaign that Putnam oversaw. She was more than just an endorser, she was an integral part of many campaigns, particularly those involving women's clothing. She had made her own garments for a long time, but now she was creating active-wear lines for big retailers. Modern Earhart luggage, her line of luggage, also became popular, representing her adventurous spirit and practical side. In order to pay for her flights, Amelia used celebrity endorsements. She used her position as associate editor at Cosmopolitan to promote women in aviation and the industry as a whole. She helped establish the first regional shuttle service between New York and Washington, D.C., and was appointed by Transcontinental Air Transport in 1929 to promote air travel, especially for women. In her role as VP of National Airways, she helped launch multiple Northeastern carriers. Amelia entered the 1929 Women's Air Derby, which Will Rogers had renamed the Powder Puff Derby since she loved competitive flying. In the heavy planes division, she placed third, even though her companion Ruth Nichols had to withdraw because of an accident. The National Aeronautic Association appointed Amelia as an official in 1930, supporting female record holders and assisting the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale in establishing comparable benchmarks on a global scale. She flew a Pitcairn PCA-2 autogyro to an altitude of 18,415 feet in 1931, breaking the previous record. Around the same time, Amelia joined the 99s, a group for women pilots. In 1929, she convened a gathering of female aviators which ignited the development of the organization. In 1930, she assumed the role of its inaugural president. When it came to women pilots, Amelia spoke out loud and clear. And she made no secret of her refusal to compete in the Bendix Trophy race in 1934, the year it outlawed women. There were also shifts in Amelia's private life. In 1928, she ended her engagement to chemical engineer Samuel Chapman. George Putnam, with whom she became closer, had divorced in 1929. It took 6 attempts at a proposal from Putnam before Amelia ultimately said yes. In what Amelia characterized as a partnership with shared control, they were married on February 7, 1931. On their wedding day, she wrote a letter to Putnam in which she asserted her desire for autonomy and her refusal to conform to conventional marital norms. Being ahead of her time, Amelia decided to preserve her own name and had progressive views on marriage. Although Amelia and Putnam did not have a honeymoon because she was so preoccupied with advertising autogyros and beech nut chewing gum, they were quite close. Putnam had 2 sons from a previous marriage, and Amelia became their stepmother as well. Amelia had a soft spot for David, the eldest son of Putnam, who would pay them many visits even though they never had children of their own. Amelia Earhart's life was a tornado of fame and aviation achievements after her successful transatlantic flight in 1928. She set out on yet another historic adventure on May 20, 1932, when she was 34 years old. She set out from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland, with the intention of flying solo to Paris like Charles Lindbergh. As her technical advisor Bernd Balchen got her Lockheed Vega 5 billion, a single-engine plane, ready for takeoff, he deftly pretended to be getting ready for an Arctic journey to deflect the attention of the media. It was a terrifying voyage across the Atlantic for Amelia. Mechanical problems, freezing weather, and strong winds met her at every step. She touched down in a pasture in Colmore, Northern Ireland, after 14 hours and 56 minutes of flying. The farmhands who had been waiting for her said, "Have you flown far?" Her response was profoundly simple. "This is America speaking." By accomplishing this, Amelia became the first woman to fly non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean on her own. Among her many honors were the Cross of Knight from the French Legion of Honor, the Distinguished Flying Cross from Congress, and the Gold Medal of the National Geographic Society from President Herbert Hoover. Amelia became well known and became friends with powerful people such as First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt as her celebrity grew. They frequently communicated and had a common interest in women's rights. Amelia and Jacqueline Cochran, another aviator, became quite close. Amelia Perkins persisted in breaking new ground in the years after her transatlantic trip. Her historic solo flight from Honolulu, Hawaii to Oakland, California on January 11, 1935, made her the first female pilot in aviation history. Remarkably mundane was this trip over an ocean that had been the site of heavy casualties in the Dole Air Race of 1927. To unwind even further, Amelia tuned in to a live feed of the Metropolitan Opera. In the latter part of that year, Amelia continued to set records with her Lockheed Vega flight from Los Angeles to Mexico City and back again to New York. She was also a competitor in the Bendix Trophy race of 1935, where she came in 5th. Her participation demonstrated her competitive spirit, even though the Vega was unable to keep up with the quicker purpose-built racers. Amelia broke 7 women's flying speed and distance records in 1930 and 1935. Old Bessie the Firehorse, her cherished Lockheed Vega, was not up to the task of her planned transoceanic flights by 1935. She started making preparations for her most daring voyage to date, a circumnavigation of the Earth near the equator. A fire that broke out at the Putnam house in Rye in late 1934 ruined a lot of Amelia's valuable possessions. This, together with George Putnam's new position at Paramount Pictures and the sale of his publishing business, led to a relocation to the West Coast. They found a modest home in Toluca Lake, California, close to major transportation routes and Hollywood studios. Paul Mantz, a stunt pilot from Hollywood, and Amelia Earhart established the Earhart-Mantz Flying School at Burbank Airport in 1935. She also served as a technical advisor to the Department of Aeronautics at Purdue University and joined the faculty as a visiting professor to advise women on their careers. Planned her world flight in early 1936, Amelia dubbed her Lockheed Electra 10E her flying laboratory, and it was purchased with funding from Purdue University. Affixing additional fuel tanks for the journey, this plane underwent extensive modifications. Captain Harry Manning, a seasoned navigator and radio operator, was originally supposed to go with her. But when Amelia and George Putnam made a navigational mistake on their test flight, they knew they needed more help. The group was augmented by Fred Noonan, a trained navigator with years of service under his belt at Pan American Airways. When traversing the treacherous Pacific, Noonan's knowledge of marine and aerial navigation came in very handy. Manning was originally supposed to lead the way to Australia, but he was removed from the squad following additional testing, leaving Noonan and Amelia alone. To fly around the world for the first time was an endeavor that started on March 17, 1937. From Oakland, California, Amelia, Noonan, Manning, and Mantz sailed to Honolulu, Hawaii. They were delayed due to mechanical troubles, and the Electra crashed during departure from Hawaii's Luke Field. The effort was cancelled due to the aircraft's serious damage. Amelia and Putnam, unfazed, raised additional funds and got ready to try again. Starting with a peaceful flight from Oakland to Miami, they opted to fly west to east this time. Amelia then made her intentions to circumnavigate the world known to the public. Her and Noonan's 1937 transoceanic voyage began in Miami and ended on June 29 in Lae, New Guinea, after making stops in South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. In all, they had gone 22,000 kilometers. The distance across the Pacific was now merely 7,000 kilometers. Leaving Lae at 10 in the morning on July 2, 1937, Amelia and Noonan set out for the small Pacific island of Howland. Their goal was a mere dot in the enormous ocean, making the flight the longest and most difficult leg. At Howland, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed to aid in communication and navigation. Amelia sent multiple communications to the Itasca during the flight, but she was unable to hear their reply. She asked for a directional bearing at 6:14 a.m., saying she was within 200 miles of Howland. Following a navigational line, she was unable to locate Howland in her last unambiguous message, which arrived at 7:58 a.m. Following that, communication ceased. Shortly after Amelia and Noonan's last transmission, the United States government launched the largest search operation ever at the time to find them. The search area that the Electra and her crew traversed encompassed hundreds of square miles of ocean, but they were not located. Many hypotheses and speculations surround their destiny. Most people agree, nevertheless, that they went down to the water after running out of fuel. The search for Amelia Earhart's identity saw a glimmer of optimism in 2024. An undersea exploration business called Deep Sea Vision just reported what might be a significant breakthrough. Near Howland Island, 16,000 feet below the surface, they found what seemed to be plane wreckage using sonar imaging. The possibility that this was Earhart's Lockheed Electra 10 aircraft sparked renewed interest and conjecture around the world. With a crew of 16 and the state-of-the-art Kongsberg Discovery Huygens 6000 autonomous underwater drone, the Deep Sea Vision's team examined more than 200 square kilometers of ocean floor. They posted videos of the discovery online, suggesting that these artifacts might be from the plane that the renowned Aviator and Fred Noonan were trying to fly around the world 87 years ago when they went down. A mix of enthusiasm and doubt has been sparked by the news. Wary experts offer their opinions. Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum curator Dorothy Cochran thinks that Earhart's plane probably went down near Howland Island due to a lack of fuel. She stresses that photographic proof is vital for confirmation, even though the sonar image is fascinating. Also dubious is anthropologist Richard Jantz, who re-examined bones discovered on Nikomororo Island. He maintains that his theory on Earhart's death on Nikomororo remains valid until the recently found plane is positively verified as Earhart's Electra. A more contemptuous voice is that of Richard Gillespie, who established the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. He is adamant that the most recent find is not the Electra Earhart's plane, because the sonar picture doesn't have any of her signature characteristics. The sonar picture shows what appears to be a U.S. Navy fighter jet, not Earhart's plane, according to Gillespie, who is in favor of the Nikomororo scenario. The public's interest has been reawakened by the revelation made by Deep Sea Vision. Despite opposing perspectives, ever since she vanished, the tale of Amelia Earhart has enchanted people all around the globe. Whatever the outcome of each new piece of information answers or more questions, it serves to perpetuate her legacy and keep the mystery going. Amelia Earhart's life is an inspiration because of her fearless accomplishments and dogged pursuit of her aspirations. Amelia Earhart's legacy as a fearless pioneer in aviation and a symbol of perseverance remains while we await additional investigations and possible confirmation. The story she tells is about more than just a plane that goes missing. It is also about never giving up on your aspirations and never stopping to find out more.